welcome to Volume 3 of the Consumer Concert Artistry. The goal of these webinars is to take the conductor beyond the notes to that realm of artistic music making. And you know the great quote by Leonardo da Vinci, the difference between the artist and the artisan are those little touches after the average man would quit that determine the master's fame. And the artisan can create an ensemble that plays in tune and in tone and in time. And certainly that's really important, but the true artist will seek to develop an informed opinion and develop the whys of the music. And the best way, of course, to understand a piece of music is through the eyes of the composer. And we're privileged tonight to have that opportunity. I should say that many years ago, I was judging a festival and heard some of the same well-tried and true band pieces, and some of them were played very well and some of them were played less well. But towards the end of the afternoon, I looked down and I saw a piece called that I'd never heard of, and it was called Paper Cut by a composer I'd never heard of, which embarrassed me because I'd like to think that I'd heard of every known composer in wind literature. And I heard it and it just blew me away. It was fresh, it was creative, it was extremely well crafted. And I thought, who is this woman? So I immediately went back to my hotel room that night and took a deep dive into her fascinating website. And if you have not done that, I encourage you to do that, but set aside several hours because it's like going into this vortex of creativity. You dive in and, well, I wonder what this is, and I wonder what that is, and I wonder what this sounds like. And what I discovered was a composer who was a highly successful commercial artist for many, many years, who, by her own admission, reinvented herself at the age of 37. And what you will find tonight and on her website is not only a brilliant mind, but a laugh out loud, self-deprecating sense of humor, a truly staggering output of creative pieces. And if imagination is the life force of the Genius Code, tonight, my friends, we're in the presence of genius. From whale songs to car washes, there's really no limit to her imagination. She's a composer, an activist, a compelling speaker, a not so amateur photographer, and as you will discover, a truly beautiful spirit. I've asked Alex tonight to share some of her insights into one of her new works. I'm such an avowed Shapiro groupie now, and I'm in awe of her talents. And you'll have the opportunity to ask questions of her at the end of her presentation. But Alex, I'm so grateful that you have the time tonight, and we all look forward to learning through the eyes of the composer.
Paula, that is the most gracious and touching introduction ever. I have to recover from that now. Thank you so much for that. And thanks to Consumer for allowing us to both have this conversation back and forth about things that matter to us and share it with everybody else here, our fellow music makers. This is really great. I thought that we would start out by taking an exploration of one of my most recent pieces that for me is probably the most cathartic one, at least in recent memory that I've written. And it's my second symphony for winds and percussion called Suspended. Do you want to launch right into that? Do you want to start talking about that, or did you want to start with something else?
Were you going to, yeah, let's jump right in. We want to hear the piece, and you're going to share some program notes before we do?
Exactly, exactly. I will read to you right now before I share screen. I thought that I would tell you a little bit about the piece, everybody, and then read the notes to you. They're not long, don't worry. I promise it's not War and Peace, and not nearly as well written either. But at any rate, Suspended was a commission that I was so fortunate to have from Kappa Kappa Psi and Tau Beta Sigma in 2021 for their big intercollegiate, their national intercollegiate band, their big conference. And as many of you know, they commissioned a piece to start things off for that conference in July. And this year we were in Grand Rapids, and I was very fortunate to have the wonderful, wonderful conductor Cynthia Johnston Turner bring this piece to life. and bring it to life, as many of you know, in very short amount of time, because it's a 4-movement piece, about 25 minutes long. Each movement does stand on its own separately as a standalone piece. I designed it that way because I think that's really a great way to share music. And not everybody has 25 minutes to program a piece, a whole symphony. But to put all those movements together in basically the 2.5 days of rehearsals that we had, as is common with these kind of, collegiate honor band situations, is remarkable. And it's remarkable for me. I am not a conductor, not unless someone's looking for a clown act. I am not a conductor, but I appreciate the art form deeply, because without conductors, my notes mean nothing, of course. And when I watch and learn from wonderful people like Dr. Crider and Dr. Johnston Turner, I watch and see what are they doing to make something that is really quite complicated at times flow through all the musicians so effortlessly, it seems, by the time of that downbeat just 2 or 3 days later. So it was a bit of a tour de force, and a great opportunity for me. I have to say that, just to tell you where I was coming from with this. The commission came to me, I was told about it, I think right before the pandemic happened. So this would have been around 2018, 2019. I kind of knew this was coming up because composers need to plan ahead, especially for bigger works. And I knew that it was going to be a larger work, something at, minimum 10 minutes. And they said, 20, 30, whatever, 20. I went 25. And there is no greater gift to a composer, especially during a time of great concern like the pandemic, and so much uncertainty and so much emotional devastation and so many other things. There's no greater gift than opening the door and saying to them, here, write something, write as long as you want, write whatever you want, write. Wow. So I grabbed that opportunity. Emotionally, it was so incredibly cathartic for me because, all of us were so moved and disturbed by what was going on in our world for so many reasons, which leads me to the program note, because I'll tell you I didn't write the program note before I wrote the piece, but I sort of already knew with the piece what I wanted to do structure-wise and how that would relate to the emotions I wanted to share. Suspended is an emotional journey, and the catharsis I felt throughout the 8 months of writing it helped keep me sane amidst a world of dismal uncertainty. The piece is composed in the tradition of an 18th century classical symphony, 4 contrasting movements which serve specific functions and reveal a story. The work begins in absolute rage and chaos, and it then alternates between moments of grief and bleakness. And then grim reality shifts to a macabre circus-like insanity. And then by the end, there are flickers of genuine hope that contrast this pervasive sense of dread. And finally, we hope, arrive at more optimistic possibilities. So that was the trajectory. If you have a longer amount of time to write, you get to tell more of a story. And of course, our great classical masters knew that very, very well. And I always look back to them, to Beethoven especially, for arcs and architecture of music. The first movement, Airborne, which I'm going to play you excerpts of each movement, just a couple minutes worth. The first one is the soul movement that is purely acoustic. And some of you know my work, and some of you know that the vast majority of my now 25, 26 band pieces are electroacoustic, but not all of them. And so the first movement is acoustic, and you'll see why when you hear it. There really was no need for a track on this one. And it launches the symphony upward with a tightly motivic sonata form of short repeating passages in an unrelenting, ever swirling and disorienting wake-up call. And I always say, when I think about it, scream with me. So let's listen to Airborne. Do you see the score?
It's beautiful.
Okay, yep. That's always a good start. And let's see, interrupt me immediately if you don't hear the music.
Yes.
So. Okay. All right. Stop the share. 1 second. Okay, did that work?
Yes.
Okay, and have we stopped the share? Sounds like a protest thing. Stop the share.
Yes, you're back on.
Sure. Okay. So I apologize to everybody who's here in the attendees who are here for that delay. Things happen, right? You punt.
Alex, no apology necessary. It probably made all those teachers out there feel really good that it happens to somebody else
There
besides.
you go. It happens to a pro. I mean, look, really. I mean, if it happens to me, don't feel bad, right? And it worked in rehearsal. Anyway, so as you can hear, that is a perpetual motion piece. And just everything is upward, upward, upward. I took those little cells of motives and just turned them on their ear constantly, and just played with these really tight themes and just repeated them in different ways, and a great deal of counterpoint, obviously. And anybody who's interested, of course, the perusal score, just get in touch with me. I'm happy to send it to you if you want to take a look. But the next movement on in the symphony is called Distanced. And the key thing for me with these 4 movements was to create great contrast, real contrast. And so Distanced is an anthemic, pensive unraveling, which begins in anguished melancholy and expands to a raw, poignant wail. Cry with me. So here is Distanced for you. 1 moment, let me get it just set up here. One moment. Okay, we're going to start in the middle, a couple, 3 minutes in, because the beginning of the piece is a lot of static, slow, heavy chords. And you're going to hear a few of them, and then I wanted you to hear how that transitions into how the piece opens up to that really emotional spot. So 1 moment here as I share again. And you see the score?
Got it.
Good. Okay. This is Distance from the middle. And as you can tell, we'll move right on to the next movement, but as you can tell in this, I was looking for a lot of space, the absolute contrast of the movement that came before. And that leads us, of course, to yet another contrast. So we go from the deeply pensive and the cathartic to the somewhat macabre, and a change of style too. Distance, of course, is I brought in an electroacoustic track that is very, very subtle. It basically very sneakily kind of doubles with some otherworldly ethereal sounds, basically what the band is doing. It would sound very much the same without the track, but the track gives tremendous depth. It plays a bit of psychoacoustic trick on the audience. Masked is very much a track-centric kind of piece, and I'll tell you why. As you look at it, you can see that there are indications, you might not be able to see it on the screen. Drop ping pong ball into inverted large china cymbal resting atop timpani tuned to E flat, etc., etc. You've got 4 percussionists doing this on 4 timpani, and all kinds of other cute little tricks that I play with ping pong balls that not only are being done live on stage, where with brightly colored ping pong balls, we had them made for the audience to see, with them being dropped on the mallet instruments to form fairy chords and all kinds of things. But I use a lot of that in the track as well to create another psychoacoustic adventure, listening adventure. So here is an excerpt of Masked to give you a sense of this. So Masked is, and it goes on, it goes into trio section. Why a trio section? Because what you just heard is the first part of a minuet and trio. I really stuck with classical 18th century form on this piece, and I had so much fun doing it, because just because you stick with the form doesn't mean your music has to sound old-fashioned. And so here is absolutely, even starting with, when you think about minuet and G, dum, ba-dum, 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 that dotted rhythm, here it is. It just doesn't quite sound like that, does it? So, so I did an absolutely proper minuet and trio. And then finally with Viral. Viral is a way of just sort of reaching for the light. And, you know, if this one was, you know, Dance With Me, I don't know what Viral is, but it's Celebrate With Me. We've got something exciting happening. And Viral has, of course, takes on a lot of different meanings. But this is basically little droplets, hopefully not of a virus, but of something, something interesting that spreads from piece to piece, I mean, from instrument to instrument. So here's an excerpt of Viral to wrap us up. And that was viral. And we end with a big, it ends very big. And you can, I think I have stopped the share once again, yes. And you can hear it on my website. So that gives you just sort of a quick chef's tour of the four movements and their contrasts and all the different things I did. Well, we could do, you know, a long conversation about all of the little techniques. But in general, when I am using electronics, I always view them, and some of you who are watching this have heard me say this before, possibly in your Zooms to your band classes, that the track is an equal and additional section of the ensemble, whether it's orchestra, band, whatever. It's an equal voice. It's creating all these textures and sounds that I can't get out of the live instruments. I want those to sound like them. And then I can do and program all kinds of things from scratch here to complement that sound. So.
What a great piece. Thanks so much for sharing that. Now everybody has to go listen to the entire work. It's just fascinating. Do you compose at the keyboard, Alex?
Depends what I'm writing. Some of this piece, the first movement, Airborne, I only wrote at this keyboard. I just typed it in. I hear it in my head, and I just literally enter it into my notation program, which happens to be Sibelius. I just literally put in the notes because I know what I want to hear. When it comes to that's an acoustic piece. When it comes to an electroacoustic piece, I do use this input keyboard, which actually doesn't make any sound itself, but it triggers different sounds because when I'm putting a piece like the other three movements together, as I said, you've got that electronic section. So just as you would for orchestra or a band that's acoustic, you're writing for that section vis-a-vis in relation to all the other sections. So if I'm writing for the woodwinds here and the low brass there and a little percussion there and then whatever my sound is here, you know, so it's all interwoven. So those electroacoustic pieces are always written here at my trusty rig, on my trusty steed. So that's the difference. But if it's not electronic, I write like the piece I just did for University of Wisconsin River Falls a couple of weeks ago that Chris Chernohoy just premiered is called Free, purely acoustic. I wrote it directly into the computer. So
you mentioned in one interview that I viewed that you started composing when you were about 8 or 9 years old. Had you had piano training? What was your beginning impetus for music at all?
My beginning impetus was being so lucky to grow up in an apartment with two parents who loved music, and especially classical music. That's pretty much all they loved was classical music. My tastes are much broader than that, but I'm really grateful that they loved classical music because they played it all the time. And in fact, it was sort of the tail wagged the dog because I started writing music by ear. And boy, did the side of my head hurt, let me tell you. I started writing, and then I asked my parents when I was 10 for piano lessons. They said, "Are you going to practice?" I said, "Yes." And they were they're very good. They gave me piano lessons. And I have to say, just because we have so many educators watching this, it is a really amazing thing that I never take for granted, that I grew up with parents who valued education, and every time geeky little Alex asked for lessons, they gave them to me, and they were in a position where they weren't wealthy, but they could afford to pay for lessons. And we all know that is not a constant in this world, and that anything composers can do to help bridge that gap, to help with the education, I think it's so important. I realized how fortunate I was that I was able to have lessons. And then when I was 15 is when I had my first composition lessons. That's when I knew I want to be a composer. I had no idea what that meant, really, and I'd never heard of a publisher, but I figured, okay, I love to write music. I want to do this. So I was just really lucky that I had education. So there you go.
That's something that those of us who are teachers always struggle with if we're not composers, how to encourage the young students in our ensembles who want. I think Frank DeKelly is a good example of that, because his band director encouraged him to write.
Yeah, I think we all should encourage them to write, especially now over for better or for worse, 2.5 years of Zooms. What have we been doing? We've been telling them to take out their phones, record sounds around them, dump them into DAWs, digital audio workstations. A lot of students have started working with that now and come up with their own sound design and their own music and their own motifs. And I did a whole curriculum based on this, and many people have been doing this with their classes. And it's terrific because it opens up a student's creativity, because there's no reason why they can't be doing the same stuff that I'm doing. You don't need the Ferrari of gear over here to do it. It's free. If they're lucky enough to have a laptop or a phone, all the software is free right now that they would need. So that's pretty awesome.
So just out of curiosity, when you were talking about some of the moods that you were creating, do you instinctively go to certain keys to create those moods, or the reaching for the light or the distance was so anguished? Why did you choose those particular key centers?
I guess the only intellectual decision I made about keys is very much like a symphony. I think I wanted to begin and end in the same key, or in relative keys. I did map out my key structure from where I was starting to where I was going to end, because I wanted the piece holistically to work in that classical form. Beyond that, I think I just tend to gravitate, fortunately for the band world, to B flats, A flats, E flats. Yay! Strings hate me. No, I'll write an A, I promise. But I don't. I think more about texture than I do about key, because for me, wherever I set the key, and a lot of my work is, I'd say, pantonal. It changes key centers, tonal centers a lot during the pieces. And so it's more for me about texture and where am I putting that mood and how am I voicing those chords to get either something deeply dark and or shiny and sparkly.
Out of curiosity, what percentage do you throw away? You compose and say, and start all over again?
50%. I mean, I think that's part of the fun of composing, is tossing stuff out. Really, if you're not doing that, you're not doing it right, as far as I'm concerned. This myth about Mozart wrote down everything perfectly from the minute it came to his head. I'm sure he did. That's great, but I'm constantly reassuring composers and students and everybody that real life, it's actually not that way for most of us. We write a lot of bad starts, as I call them, before we come up with the thing that's going to hold our attention and thus hold the audience's attention. But that's part of the process, and I think that's a beautiful part of the creative process, is trying until you hit on the thing where you go, I like that. I'm going to keep working with that. And there's no such thing as perfection to begin with. That we wouldn't be human if there were. And it's just that joy of discovery and continuing to try different things until you find the key that unlocks the personal door for you. And your solution isn't going to be the same as anybody else's, and that's also a big fun part of it too.
So your parents really supported you, I see, because you went to two small, little-known schools, Juilliard and the Manhattan School. Yes. With whom did you study? Who were your
well, Juilliard, I graduated their pre-college division in composition, and I studied with Craig Schuler and Bruce Adolph, who's hilarious. And I did 2 summers at the Aspen Music School and Festival. I think I was their youngest composer, which I'm sure they regretted terribly. I was like 16 and 17. I was wild, but I had a great time, and that just unlocked the world to me. And that was Michael Tchaikovsky, who was also at Juilliard there. And then I went to Manhattan School of Music, and my primary teacher was the great Ursula Mamlock, recently passed away a few years ago, renowned serialist, interestingly, from Berlin. And then also secondarily, I got to study with John Corigliano, who is, as we all know, a remarkable man and composer, just incredible. And so many of the techniques that both Mamlock and Corigliano taught me when I was 18, 19, 20, I still use to this day. Very, very much so. So there is great benefit in having a toolkit. I'm often asked, do you have to have degrees and do you have to go to school to compose? And the flat answer is absolutely not. Absolutely not. What you need is a heart, first and foremost, and then ears. Hopefully they're connected. But some people, not so much, right? But if you then add education onto it, and you have what I always joke, the trusty Sears Craftsman toolkit of cool things that you can do with notes. If you have that education, it just makes it easier to do your job as a composer. It gives you more tools. So no, you don't have to have any of that. And I'm a shining example of that. I am the proud owner of a high school diploma. I left Manhattan School of Music. I did really well at school. They didn't kick me out, I promise. But I got a gig that took me out to LA to score a low budget, film. And so I decided, with Mr. Curigliano's blessings at the time, by the way, he said, I think he said to me something along the lines of, a conservatory is trade school. You got a job, go work. So I left school a year early to move out to LA and start working in the commercial world, for which I stayed in for about 15 years. So the education is so wonderful, because the more tools you have, the happier and easier your life is going to be, But
Wow.
yeah,
You've got a couple of questions coming in. One, I think you
great.
already answered, about what mode that you write the piece, but what software do you use when you're composing?
This is Digital Performer, which is very similar to Logic, for those of you who might know that one better.
Mhm.
Digital Performer by Mark of the Unicorn, and I use Sibelius. Those are my two primary things, and then a gazillion plugins, as you can imagine, because I'm usually programming from scratch. I do a lot of recording of found sounds and things that just sound interesting to me during the day, and I dump them. I call myself the happy little dung beetle of sound. I roll my sounds into the computer, store them up, and then dive into those smelly folders to see what interesting sound might I want to work with on a new piece or something. I don't use sounds on everything, but sometimes I do, So I always have a collection of interesting things, and so that's what I use, for
I'm
digital
trying to
audio.
read some more of these questions. Let's see, what else do we have here coming in? What software do you use? And everyone is talking, they're raving about your
Oh,
website, which is great. And any
thank
other
you.
questions in the chat? It's time for them to toss them in there, guys. This is
Yeah.
tell us about Dial-A-Mood. While
Oh,
I'm trying to look
Dial-A-Mood.
at it, this is
That's
great.
that's sort of a throwback. It's a goofy looking little page, but I keep it up there. It's a throwback to my film and TV days, because when you go on to the slick websites of composers in media, what is the most important thing that a media composer does but address emotion? I mean, well, you could argue it should be the most important thing we do in the concert world, but the thing is, the emotion is sort of being dictated to you by a director, a producer, and a music editor, etc., right? Or a score editor, a film editor. So emotion. So if you go onto film music sites, often they will group their excerpts, their little demos together by emotion, action stuff, romance stuff, lyrical stuff, fast stuff, slow stuff, like music library stuff is dealt with that way. So I took a cue from that. I thought, no pun intended, I thought, well, if they're doing it this way, and I used to do it this way in film and TV, why shouldn't we do that in concert music for those who might be looking for a certain kind of thing? That if you have a hole in your program and you're looking for something lyrical or something this or something that, well, go to it. So I created Dial-A-Mood, just with a little tongue in cheek, I just thought it would be a fun way for people to randomly explore things, as opposed to just going to my catalog and seeing, and there's a big catalog page where you click on a title, and it's by instrumentation or trios or quartets or whatever, just another way to help people dial in to what you do as a
Right.
composer.
Would you share a little bit of information about your list of underrepresented composers?
Yes,
I
and
think
I'm
that's a
actually
great
gonna
resource.
thank you for bringing that up before we wrap up for the day. Let's see if I can get this back on the screen. 1 second. We'll get all the pizza off here. Do you see it now? Is it on the screen?
Yeah, got your
Good.
website.
Okay. So I created a few years ago, about 5 years ago now, I think. One of the best ways to raise awareness of the fact that we need a better balance of composers in our music world, in the band world, and in education and everywhere, is to keep talking about it. And it's easy to talk about it, but then when people are very well intentioned and want to find the music and find these composers, sometimes they don't quite know where to start. They don't know where to look. And so what I loved is seeing on Facebook over the years, people would use crowdsourcing. They would drop a note into Facebook saying, hey, I'm looking for a piece by this kind of composer, and it should be about that long and this kind of instrumentation. And all of us, and a lot of people would put in pieces that, and links to pieces and composers that not only would inform the person who started the thread, but it would inform all of us reading the thread. And it was just terrific. So I used to participate in those all the time until I realized that I would, I was doing it so much, it was getting a little cumbersome. I had started a little template of, clip and paste. So I decided I have this really big web server and big website. Why don't I create a page that links to literally about 100 different aggregated links here that for female identifying, for general diverse stuff, female identifying. We keep scrolling down. We go to Black, Latino, Asian, American Indian. Then we go down from all of those, and we go to LGBTQI2 plus. And then resources for teaching theory and history, because it's not only on the podium that we need diversity, but with our examples, right? So let's make it easy for people to find music theory examples. Here's a whole bunch of really cool sites. And I update this all the time. And then, of course, you can keep going down to other kinds of resources, videos and podcasts, and a few of my thoughts on the matter. As you can imagine, I do a lot of speaking on this. And so I want to recommend to everybody that if you hop over to my site, this page is linked front and center just as you start scrolling down. It's called Programming Resources, and share it with everybody. And it's just one of many ways to promote composers and help people get to know composers. It's a big, big field out there. There are thousands of wonderful composers out there from all kinds of backgrounds. And it is daunting to find them and to educate yourself. So anything that all of us can do to help, we try, right? So it didn't take too much thought to say, gee, we need a page like this. Jody Blackshaw has done one. A number of people have done similar kinds of things, and it's so important. So.
And we're directing all of our Midwest performers to look at that page, because it is a wonderful, wonderful resource.
Thank you.
Well, we're about to wrap up. I have one more question that I know several people have alluded to on the chat here. Because I know that you're doing lots of commissions. And of course, it depends on the financial situation, but many directors now are getting together consortiums so that they can, realize their dream of having someone of your stature do that. But the question is, how far out are you commissioning now? If some directors wanted to get together a consortium and have Alex Shapiro write something for them, what will you be looking at as far as time?
It's not too bad right now, because I've given myself a little bit of room after a whole whopper of a lot of pieces the past couple of years. So we're looking at late 2023 to 2024, not too far out. It's not that bad. 2024. So yeah, and I love to write for people at all levels. I wrote when I was writing Suspended, which is a grade 5, 6, whatever it is. At the exact same time, folks, I took a couple of weeks off and I wrote a 0.5 piece called Count to 10. That was so much fun. And because my pet peeve is that why are we not teaching meters beyond 5/4, 7/4? Why aren't we teaching meters to beginners? They can all count to 10 by the time they're 3. Why are we protecting them from scary meters? There's nothing scary about counting to 10. So in Count to 10, they actually count to 9. And you can see it on my website and listen to it.
Oh, that's great.
At all levels, I get excited about writing. I think that every professional composer who can write for very high level players and should also be writing for absolute beginners and everybody in between. Really.
Absolutely. Well, Alex, thank you so much for not only sharing your time, but sharing your wonderful sounds. It's such a privilege to hear music and see music through the eyes of the composer. And I can't tell you how excited I am to hear the next thing that you're going to, because it's so inventive, and I think this is where music is going. And I certainly hope that we get to chat again sometime. And we'd love it if you were ever free enough to come to the Conselmer Institute. You would be such a rock star. There are about 300 teachers who come to that every summer.
That's fantastic.
Yeah,
I love that. Yeah.
They're just there to learn about new pieces and about new ideas and share ideas. But I really feel strongly that the teachers who have stayed in the profession are the heroes, just like the doctors and the nurses and whatever, because music we need music more than ever. And I know I'm preaching to the choir, but I'm so grateful for your time. Do you have any last thoughts before we move into the sunset here?
Just one last thought is the general one of let's just all encourage everybody to express themselves and express themselves freely. There's no wrong way to make music. And so that's the general thought. And the other thought for those of you watching who might be interested in electroacoustic music and haven't done it before and are only slightly terrified by it, trust me, it's not as scary as it seems. And the great thing is, as long as people like me and Steve Bryant and Jen Jolly and other people who write for, and James Davis, it's a long list now, it's a growing list of people who write EA music, as long as we're looking at the daisies from this side up, we're really easy to reach. We'll walk you through everything. And we also have, even for when we're on the other side of the daisies, we provide tech setup sheets, and it's really quite simple to get your PA set up for in the band room and also on stage for these kinds of performances. It's not as hard as it looks. So I just wanted to reassure everybody about that as well. So for those of you who haven't yet gotten your feet wet, which when we talk about electricity, not a good combination, bad metaphor, but getting your feet wet in electroacoustic music. Anyway, Paula, thank you so much for having this conversation with me. I mean, I am such a fan of yours and such an admirer of yours and everything that you do to bring light into the music world. So thank you. And thanks to Beth and to Erin for hosting us today.
And I'm reading in the chat, and absolutely compelling. Thank you. Fantastic. Bravo. Much love to you. Thanks again so much, Alex. And we look forward to hearing your next creation.
Okay. Bye.
Take care.